Hello, everyone. Grab your coffee. And I decided to do this old school and without electrons because I figured you may have specific questions about water. There's a bunch going on, whether it's PFAS, Gelman, the way we price water in the city. And so I'm going to give you a little background of kind of how I got here and why some of the things I'm going to say you could actually pay attention to. I know a little bit about this.
Would you mind moving up?
No?
Closer?
Sure.
Okay.
I got to bring my notes and my coffee. So I'm Matt Naud and a good friend of Brian Weiner, who invites me episodically to come share some good news and some cautionary tales. I have lived in the city, most recently we moved back in 1995, so I've been here a long time. I live south of Weber's, looking out over the sister lakes in Dolph Park, and those are the only two natural lakes in the city. They're leftover kettle lakes from glaciers. So my background is I recently left the city of Ann Arbor in November. I was 17 years as the environmental coordinator for the city. And I was the lead staff person for the city's environmental commission. So if you have concerns about what you think the city council is doing, that commission's job is to make recommendations to city council on these kind of policy issues. So I grew up in Detroit, had a chance to get out of Michigan to go to college, went to Boston College, and then came back to Michigan. I have a master's degree in biology and a master's degree in public policy. And then did about 11 years of consulting in DC to EPA and other state and federal agencies. And then in 2001, we had moved back in 95, and my wife and I were early telecommuters. We worked out of the house in an old 1870 farmhouse in Dixboro. And then the city posted this job, and they created this new environmental commission. Chris Cole, actually, who's the new budget director for the state of Michigan, was a city council person and helped create that. And so I calculated, I think I've been to 180 environmental commission meetings through my career. And that doesn't count city council, planning, other things, but anyway, so I know a lot about the history of Ann Arbor and a lot of the environmental issues. And Brian asked me to come and talk about water. So, but he also asked me to talk a little bit about faith and kind of how that kind of came. I'm a Catholic. A little lapsed, don't go all the time.
We won't get that again, sorry.
I am Matthew, of Matthew, Mark, Luke. We didn't get a John, so it was Joanna. And then we joked that my parents left the church because the next two were Monique and Renee. And all the boys born on Thursdays, all the girls born on Sundays.
Oh, interesting.
My mom was an only child, and I think there was no way she was going to have just one child. But so it turns out Michigan for grad school was the first public school I went to. I grew up in Detroit, in the city, south of 8 Mile, and so I went to a Catholic grade school, and then a Jesuit all-boys high school. One of the alums just played for Michigan State last night, Cassius Winston, is a U of D High grad. And U of D High is interesting that it's the only Catholic school that stayed in the city. So when I was there, I graduated in '79, lots of people had moved out of the city. So, but the motto of the school was men for others, and I think that's been part of my upbringing is this, how do we do things for other people? How do we do things to make sure there's equity in poor and vulnerable populations? And coming full circle, I was part of a national network of city sustainability directors, so people like me doing this sustainability work in cities. And a lot of the focus now is how do we do this work in cities and do it in equitable ways? And how do we make sure that poor and vulnerable populations are taken care of, because they're often the ones that aren't showing up at a public meeting. And there are new ways that cities are using certain tools to get folks to public meetings and hear their voices. So, and then I didn't go to Boston College because it was Jesuit. It was my chance to get out, but it was, you know, we did take philosophy. We did take some of these courses that were, you know, just enlightening, reading philosophers and things like that, and a lot of original work. And so, and this is, you know, I've been trying to think of like, how has faith, you know, worked in my career choices? And I think it's this sense of stewardship, and how do we take care of the environment? How do we have a responsibility? And especially with climate change these days, you know, humans have made some radical choices that are making some serious changes, and we're going to have to make some significant choices to kind of hold back some of the, what we think are the worst changes to come. So what I'm going to do is touch on, you know, like, where does your water come from? Where does it go? How do we treat it? But I'm also, you know, feel free to stop me and ask any questions. And I'm going to ask you for things you were interested in specifically. So maybe we can do that now. You know, just, are there specific issues you want me to touch on as I kind of walk through some of these, I think, basic facts about water and challenges we're facing, both, you know, here locally, but then statewide, and where I think some opportunities are. And there's always opportunities for you to be involved in the city. And I think that's something, with losing the print newspaper and things like that, I think it's hard for people to kind of stay up to speed on even where the challenges are and how they can participate and have their voices heard. So
It used to be in community access TV too. You used to be able to watch them on, you know, cable channels like council meetings and stuff like that. That's gone too.
No, council is still on, isn't it?
I think
Is
it's, you have to have Comcast though to get it. Like,
Oh,
we have
yeah,
Universe,
yeah.
but you can watch it on the internet now, live.
Yeah, you can until they decide that what they're talking about is no longer public all of a sudden. And then it goes away.
Well, they do the closed
It's
sessions.
so annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's aggravating, because that's supposed to be a public.
It's supposed to be a
Yeah.
public meeting, and it's not. Oh, I'm so upset about this. But anyway.
Okay,
I was having a new well done this week. I live in Lyman Township in Dexter. There was a huge fire at my place last weekend, and so it 40,000 volts flowed into the house, blew up the well. So I'm having a new well done, and I'm very interested in anything you can tell me, and those of us who live in the woods, about what ways we can remediate our water, what we need to be on the lookout for. I know there are high levels of arsenic. I don't really know anything about PFAS.
Right. Yeah.
And is there any defense for that? And I mean, this is sort of it's a horrible experience. It's an opportunity for me to, I mean, this is maybe
Right.
a bailiwick, how deep should wells be now? And, you know.
I'm not going to answer all of this, but I'm going to answer some of it and then give you the right person you need to talk to at the county,
That would be helpful.
whose job it is to help you with these kind of
Oh,
questions.
really? Okay.
Yeah. So private drinking water wells, PFAS.
Yeah.
How about the Delman cleanup
Uh-huh.
for
The
issues?
black bear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and lead.
Lead in drinking water. Yep. Yep.
Just cursory on Enbridge and their pipeline.
Oh, the line 5? Oh, this is
What was
good.
that?
Brian, you're going to have
Line
to keep
5
track of
under
the
streets.
questions.
Yeah.
Sir?
I'd be interested in sort of what's the longer term view for Great Lakes climate change.
Yes.
Yep, there's a national assessment that just came out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're starting to find prescription drug in certain concentrations in water, and I'm not sure if the testing is catching up with that, and I don't know the status, but
We can touch on that in the source water. And actually, Ann Arbor was early in doing that. I think it's not on the website anymore, but we did some testing about these emerging contaminants. And I think, one of the challenges, so the answer is yes, there's measurable levels of ibuprofen. But this is where our ability to detect is getting better and better. So the challenge we've got is, what hasn't been brought up is, if I'm finding ibuprofen at parts per trillion, does that have any kind of pharmacokinetic effect? So that's where the kind of risk assessment work. And I think the feds, and historically the state, that may change with the new governor and the new EGLE director, not DEQ anymore, may change because there's so many chemicals that are allowed into the environment before we've proven whether they're good or bad, and that's actually what happens with PFAS. So, okay, so remember what you said, because I won't remember them all, and at some point I'm going to come back and say, who did I forget? So let's start with, do you all know where your water comes from? So if you're on city municipal water, where does your water come from?
The faucet.
The faucet. Start there, and now we'll move upstream.
Huron River.
Huron River for most of it, and right at Barton Pond. And then we have wells, about 15% of the water, down at the municipal airport, so State Street.
Isn't there one out by Ann Arbor Woods or something, just off Washington? There's a big tower.
Oh, the water
The
tower.
towers are
Is that
different.
different? Oh,
And
okay.
that, if you don't know, the towers are there not so much to store water as to store pressure. So that when you turn the tap on, there's water there, and that water way up high, and we do that kind of at night, we fill it up, and then, so that there's various pressure districts. So you build your water plant at the high part of the city, which is why it's up at Sunset. And I think May 6th, there's a tour. So check the city's website. It's fascinating. And part of it is just the inside. It was built in the 20s, and so there's all this beautiful tile and chrome knobs that don't work anymore because it's all computer controlled. So most of your water comes from the Huron River, and then some from these wells. And we're the only users of the river for drinking water. No one else uses the Huron River for drinking water. And we are the first city west of Detroit to make its own water. So,
Can you speak to Pittsfield Township, where that water comes from?
that's Detroit water. Yep. That's Detroit water, Yucca, Ypsilanti's water.
Which comes from the Great Lakes, right?
Yeah, I think they go I think they don't take it out of the river as much as they go all the way up to Huron and Lake Huron and bring it all the way down. But I'm not exactly sure of that.
That's good, but they take yours
Yeah.
higher. Yeah, Huron, up in Lake Huron.
Yeah, so about average day for us is about 19 million gallons a day is what the water plant makes. But on the peak day, hot day in July when people are filling pools, watering lawns.
Washing the gardens.
Yep, it was historically about 38 million gallons a day. So this is where we own and operate a system that will handle 38 million gallons a day because there's these peak demand days, but the average is 19. So when you hear some of the discussions about how do we price water, what you want to do is kind of price the kind of base load to everybody, but you want to price the kind of peak users. They should pay for that bigger part of the system. And so that's where, if you followed any of the increases, your water rates went up a little bit. And but I would argue, and we can talk about this, I think people pay more for their cell phones and their cable bills than they do for this life-giving resource that we provide right to your house, without Flint issues and things like that. The guy who makes your water has an undergrad degree from Yale and a master's degree in engineering from Stanford. I mean, This guy had choices about where he wanted to work and chooses to be here. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but I like knowing where my water comes from, who makes it. I actually wrote to Ari at Zingerman's, because if you go into the Roadhouse, there's all these pictures of like Neiman Ranch, where this meat comes from and this cheese comes from. And I said, there's about a dozen people up on Sunset that make this life-giving food source for you, handcrafted. And I said, you need to put their picture up there. And he hasn't done it yet, but they did get the whole, they invited a lot of the Zingerman staff to have a tour up there one time. So at least they saw where that came from. So you put your water way at the top of the hill, and then you put your wastewater treatment way down at the bottom of the hill. So on the southeast side of town, of course, we wouldn't put it in Ann Arbor, we'd put it in Ann Arbor Township. It is our wastewater plant that we just rebuilt to the tune of $130 million. But, again, that treatment process, technically you could take the water that comes out at the end, pipe it right back to the plant, and it's cleaner than what we pull out of our pond.
We don't do that?
We don't do that. We don't need to here because we're pretty flush with fresh water. Other communities in the Southwest, they're having to start do things like that. Where was I just? Utah actually has met a faculty member, and she's evaluating a program up there. They have 2 sets of pipes that go to everyone's house. One is your primary culinary water, drinking, but the secondary water is treated wastewater that people use for lawns and things like that. And pardon? I need to double check, but it's a way to kind of lower the use of the more precious resource and reuse. But with PFAS and things like that, I'm curious how well that's going to continue to work.
But where does our treated water go?
Right back into the Huron.
Oh, so we do indirectly.
We recycle it, so it
Right, okay, so
gets
indirectly
basically from Barton to Getty's Dam. So we take it out upstream of Barton and we put it in downstream.
Yep.
In Superior Pond, there's a Superior Dam, and we own all 4 dams along the river. So Barton, Argo, Getty's, and then Superior. Superior and Barton make hydro, the 2 in the middle don't. And so they're referred to as recreation dams, and that's where your park millage money helps pay to take care of those, because the only function they really do is they make ponds for rowers and canoers and kayakers. So, I think those discussions are going to continue. It costs about $1 million to manage one of those dams for about 20 years. I'm just saying, it's a community choice, and it's $1 million to take them out, roughly, as long as the sediment's not a problem. I think they're IPSI's looking at taking out the dam in Peninsula. So I'm going to jump to Gallivan, because I paid attention to that for 17 years, and I live right on top of the plume.
Matt, before you do that, apropos of these dams, taking these dams out, there was, they're getting ready, the city's getting ready to allow development down there where the old petroleum gas manufacturing plant was.
Yep.
Right there next to the Yankee Dancer. And it was with the councilman, the 4th Ward councilman said, if that development goes in right there, we are stuck with that dam forever, because if you take that dam out, the Argo Dam, if you take that Argo Dam out, it's going to flood that floodplain right there where they're getting ready to build them.
Kind of, yes and no. So the water, same amount of water is going to go through that spot whether the dam's there or not. And so the challenge is that normally the river used to run right through that site in kind of a gentle curve. And they engineered it so now it makes a sharp left as it goes over the dam. You would have to probably engineer something to make sure it did that hard left. But we looked into this back in 2006 when we did the Huron River and Impoundment Management Plan. And could you take the dam out? You just think of it as you're like pulling the plug in a bathtub. So Argo Pond all of a sudden goes like this, but the volume of water doesn't change, except it's going to be through a narrower spot. So there could be more erosion. But I think there's an engineered way you could do this, and technically they're going to be leaving most of that floodplain undeveloped. And you're going to hear about climate change next week, but just a couple of tidbits while you're thinking. So working with the University of Michigan, we looked at precipitation 1950 to 1980, that 30-year period, and then 1980 to 2012. And we measured a 44% increase in precipitation.
In Ann Arbor.
In Ann Arbor. Same weather station, hasn't moved. Smarty pants U of M climate scientists. I mean, seriously. And then if you look at the storm that happened 1% of the time in that first 30-year period, so the kind of more extreme storm, how many times is that happening in the next 30-year period? It's up to 41%. So the climate models have said you're going to get more rain in more extreme events and probably periods of drought in between. So we're not going to be immune to some of the things we're seeing in the Southwest with drought. But you put it in scale, and if I had my slides, you'd see a question saying, how many U of M stadiums full of water fall on Ann Arbor every year that we have to manage through a stormwater system? It's 117.
Say that again. How many?
117 stadiums full of water fall on the city of Ann Arbor every year, and that's 23 more than it used to be. So we have to manage 23 more stadiums full of water. So Ann Arbor's fortunate, so this moved from your drinking water and your wastewater to stormwater, which we're fortunate, whoever did it was great because lots of cities didn't, and it's a hot mess. We don't have a combined sewer system like Detroit and other big cities, where the rainwater and your toilet water both go to the same pipe, and if you're getting more extreme events, those pipes overflow, and so Detroit literally puts billions of gallons of untreated sewage into the Detroit River. Well, Chicago actually basically didn't even treat their wastewater. They just went to the Chicago River and down to the Mississippi. So big cities are not, there's a bunch of big cities struggling with this. Ann Arbor's has separate pipes though. So the rain gutters you see in the street, those go to different pipes than your toilet water. And it goes straight to the river untreated. So that's why we do extra street sweepings, things like that to control for stormwater. In stormwater here, we have a utility where we wouldn't need those pipes if we hadn't built the city. Nature took care of the water. And we need a way to kind of pay to upkeep that. So the city uses near infrared flyover data every 3 years, and it takes a picture of the surface, and it tells what's growing, what's photosynthesizing, and what's not.
Hard to see.
Right, and so then we bill you based on the square footage of hard, impervious surface. But it's truly a utility because we'll credit you for putting in a rain barrel, putting in a rain garden. And one thing, whether you like development or not, every single new development improves the stormwater system because we make the developer hold a 100-year storm on site. So here's where it gets complicated when you think about floodplains. FEMA draws a floodplain map using 4.3 inches of rain in 24 hours and then models where it's going to go. And you're not allowed to build residential in the floodplain. I just told you rain's up 44%.
Yeah,
so
4
if you
inches.
go to Atlas 14, NOAA Atlas 14 is an updated set of data and storm frequencies. FEMA hasn't updated their numbers in years. The new number is 5.1 inches in 24 hours. So we built that into our new stormwater regs. So we make a new developer hold a 100-year storm. And love U of M, big fan, was on the alumni board, but they built the Munger building, where Bloomie Burgers used to be, $180 million graduate residence hall, and did virtually nothing in stormwater, because they don't have to follow our rules. So it's the one area where I'm kind of like, shame on you, you know? It's like, and I bet none of that money was public money. I bet that was all, Charlie Munger gave $110 million. He's the lawyer for Berkshire Hathaway. So, you know, that's my one area where I'm like, U of M, you could do more, because every time a new building gets built, it's a lost opportunity. So all the new stuff you saw down on Main Street, there's like first floor parking, and there's giant rooms storing stormwater there that hold it and then let it out slowly after the big event's gone. So that's why, again, whether you like development or not, our rules are strong, and they're actually county-wide rules. So we have a water resource commissioner. So that's,
The Fingerly property, isn't that a low-level property?
it's in the floodway.
And
Oh, yeah,
there's
it's
what
flooded
property?
many times.
Fingerly,
Yeah,
if you look-
Is that going to be a problem? Because University bought it, and now they're being.
well, if you look at the floodplain map for the city of Ann Arbor, the floodplain stops at Hill Street. It's just a straight line, because of course floodplains just stop in straight lines, right? No, U of M had a study done and somehow got the state to say that there's no floodway there. And we know that it's even bigger than what's FEMA's drawing. So, you know, I think we try and tell developers that, you know, yes, this is the 100-year floodplain of FEMA, but we know that's an underestimate of where the water's going to be.
Has the city of Ann Arbor gone to the Board of Regents with this information to ask them to do better?
I don't know whether we've specifically asked. If you go Google, there's a great Observer article Julie Halpern did, like storm over Ann Arbor or something, and it has faculty, you know, talking about what U of M does and what their policy is. You know, U of M, if you don't know, is a constitutional corporation that predates the state. So their seal is 1817, and Michigan's is 1837. So they do their own food inspection. They will voluntarily comply with almost anything, but, you know. So let me keep going. Gelman. So Gelman's one of those things where we had some bad legislators write bad laws, and that's what MDEQ can enforce. They can't enforce things that aren't the law. And then the state sued Gelman, it got into court, and Judge Sheldon was not great for the cleanup. He tended to treat DEQ as a plaintiff, and in Michigan, you don't have to, cleanup's the wrong words. You don't actually have to clean up anything in Michigan as long as no one's exposed to it. So if you're all on municipal drinking water and you've got 1,4-dioxane 20 feet down, no one's exposed to it. So it can be allowed to just run through the city. So the judge allowed Gelman to let 2,800 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane cruise through with the idea that it's going to vent to the Huron River, probably running right through the manufactured gas plant site. Nobody's thought about what a solvent running through an old gas plant site is going to do. And the other cleanup standard we had in Michigan was 85 parts per billion. And this is again where the legislature has to change these standards. And we finally got it changed to, well, let me back up. So when I started, cleanup standard was 85 parts per billion. It used to be 3. And then John Engler came in and it became 77 and 85. And everywhere else regulates this at like 0.3 or 3 parts per billion. And I'll be honest, I mean, it got political and it was happened because of Flint. You know, because of Flint, people are paying attention more to municipal water. So I sat on a panel to try and change all the cleanup criteria for all chemicals because we had been one of the people yelling at DEQ they needed to do more. And EPA came out with a study showing that 1,4-dioxane is about 17 times more toxic than they thought it was. So that number gets put into an algorithm and they estimate body weight and a lot of other things, and you get a number that comes out at the end. And So changing the toxicity assumption should change the number at the end. Michigan hadn't done anything. This came out in 2010, and it took till 2017, late 2017, before we got it down to 7.2, which at least gets it in the right order of magnitude. Then the other thing is Sheldon retired. And with a new judge, the city had tried to intervene before because we didn't think that DEQ's attorneys were representing our interests as well. And just full caveat, I don't work for the city anymore. I'm not speaking for the city. They're still in court. You know, I can't talk about anything that I know from when I was in those meetings. But, I mean, these are all just facts. So, city intervened, so did Scioto Township, so did the Watershed Council, and so did the County Health Department. So now, no decision is going to be made without those 4 local government and NGO people in the room. So how that's going to come out, I don't know, but at least city voices and county voices are in the room. And Gelman, you know, Charlie Gelman started the company, and then it got bought by Paul Life Sciences, and then that got bought by Danaher. Danaher is another giant company, and ironically makes the treatment system to clean the 1,4-dioxane out of the drinking water in Tucson, Arizona. Because they had a military base that contaminated. 1,4-dioxane tended to be associated with another solvent. And so if you were tracking a TCE plume, the 1,4-dioxane was like 2 miles farther down because it sticks with water and it just wants to travel with water. So Gelman's a concern, and our main concern is could it go north and could it get into Barton Pond where it's in your drinking water? The city paid for outside advisors to come look at that, and we're pretty sure it's not, except the wells in the north are pretty far apart. I think at least previously we talked about increasing the number of wells. There is a group that meets, if you're concerned about the Gelman issue, called CARD.
Citizens for Action.
Remediation of dioxane. Rita LaCruso, I think, came up with that acronym. They meet once a month. Roger Rail's there, and there's a bunch of citizen reps. You know, it's not the biggest environmental threat to the city. It's a big concern. We need to, you know, watch it, and you know, we've spent a lot of money trying to figure this out. And Gelman, you know, we'll see what happens with what Gelman has to do next to clean it up.
Because supposedly that site, that Gelman, Paul, whatever you want to call it, they stopped doing what they were doing that was bad how many years ago?
In the 80s.
Right.
But the point just keeps going.
Well, I was just going to say, how long does that residual, I mean, I would.
Well, one of the
20
questions,
years.
yeah, one of the questions that comes up is there's still contaminated soil on the site, and is that a source that is continuing to go into the groundwater? Groundwater doesn't move that fast, so big amounts that got in, you know, it's still migrating, and you can see it in the wells where concentrations go up and go down. And 1,4-dioxane is also a challenge. It's a small molecule, and so it tends not to be good food for critters that are, you know, bacteria and things like that that are in the ground and in the soil. Whereas like gas stations and things like that. And I'm going to go back to cleanup for a minute. So one of the things that I think the state's not really paying attention to is with this idea of not cleaning it up. So let's say Brian and I own a gas station, and we bought it, we didn't do the contamination, and we want to put up affordable housing. We don't have to clean it up as long as we don't expose anyone. So we could put plastic barriers down to make sure none of the gas got into the problem with this policy that the state legislature passed and MDEQ enforces is the city of Ann Arbor owns the land next to every single property because we own the sidewalk and the street. Well, in the sidewalk, in the street, are things like water mains. Now, they're under pressure, so any gas that gets out into the street isn't going to get into the water main. What it is going to do is surround the gasket of the water main, and volatiles in that gas help break down those gaskets. So we may have long-term maintenance problems. You've got a stormwater pipe that's in there. That's not always perfectly sealed. So now you've potentially got gas getting into stormwater pipes that go directly to the Huron with no treatment, or sanitary pipes where this material is getting in. And at least that's going through the treatment process where there is, depending on what the substance is, some level of treatment that's going to occur. But this is a policy choice that the state made. By not having to clean it up, it makes it cheaper to redevelop sites. So Brian and I can build whatever we want there and make a lot of money and not clean it up. So we use a brownfield program here in Ann Arbor, and I'm pretty proud of the work we've done there. I actually still sit on the Brownfield Authority where if Brian and I go to the city and say, we didn't make this mess, but we're happy to spend $500,000 cleaning it up. And what we'll do is then the new taxes we pay on the property get captured by the Brownfield Authority and get reimbursed Brian and I for the $500,000 we spent. So no existing tax entity loses any money. Everybody keeps getting the $100,000 a year we were paying, but when we build our new fancy building and start paying $500,000, that extra $400,000 a year goes into a fund that can be used to pay us back. So some of that's going to happen at the manufactured gas plant. They're going to be asking for a brownfield there.
Is that sometimes used for dry cleaners? Because I think there was a dry cleaning site that was
Near
actually
the
brownfield.
Washtenaw Dairy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Armin Cleaners is,
Yeah.
don't live next to any dry cleaner ever. Just seriously. Because dry cleaning fluid will go through uncracked concrete and into the building. So this is another big, it's more of an air quality issue we're having with volatilization to indoor air, VI issues. Because we're finding that lower concentrations of chemicals can get in through subsurface and then into buildings. And so often it's a relatively easy solution. It's like radon. You put in a radon unit that kind of takes that gas and just vents it and dilutes it into the air. How am I doing on time?
You're very fine.
Okay, I want to make sure I get to some of these others. Your deep well Gen Con at the County Public Health and CONN. The environmental health folks are out on Zeeb Road.
Yeah, that's not far.
She knows all about Gelman, she knows all about well installations, and probably can help you. See, one of the challenges is, I had the same thing out in Dixboro. I had to put a new well in. But I paid to have somebody else test it for 120 different organics and inorganics because I was like, the county only tests for two things. E. coli, coliform bacteria that would indicate is your septic field contaminated with your drinking water. And then nitrates, I think is the other one.
Arsenic,
Arsenic too.
that's a big one.
You can actually have radon in water. So it comes up through the soil, through these drinking water wells. So that is where Jen probably can't technically tell you who to choose to get your water tested. But
Who did you use?
I used a testing service in Ypsilanti, and I forget the name. There's a couple good ones in town. And my guess is they probably got something posted on the website. But if you're not around a lot of industry, you probably don't have PFAS.
There's a manufacturing facility that just wants the status of maybe 3 years.
So let's talk a little bit about PFAS. So PFAS is a forever chemical, and that word is starting to kind of get in my brain now, because it really is forever. These things tend not to break down, and they were used in things like Teflon, nonstick, 3M's Scotch Guard. So I bet all the carpet in our houses that are stain resistant are full of PFAS. It turns out PFAS is in most food packaging. So, what? I don't know about that, but, so it's kind of been used, Gore-Tex, you know, all of this stuff to make it slippery in water. And so when you hear about PFAS, PFAS is a category of fluorinated compounds. It turns out there's like 3,000 of them. And we're only, when you start hearing numbers like the state of Michigan wants to regulate PFAS, there's a number they're tossing around. Right now it's a 70 part per trillion limit, and that's just for 2 of them. That they, PFOA and PFOS as opposed to PFOS. So now, like the state of Michigan, we're now, when I left the city, we were testing for like 24 different ones. And what we're finding is it's in the Huron River. And what we're finding is that they found a plating company up in Wixom, I think, that was a significant source. And wastewater treatment plants don't take this out, so it's just kind of passing through and getting in. And these are tiny amounts. Parts per trillion is like, well, it's not like, it's exactly 10 to the minus 12. You know, this is, I think of 300,000 people in the United States. So 300 million. So a part per billion is like a third of a human being. Part per trillion is like baby toenail of one human being in all of that human mass. You know, it's a tiny amount, but the data are showing that they're thinking that 10 parts per trillion of this over a lifetime exposure is a problem. And what Ann Arbor's done is invest, and this is all in the newspaper, you can read it, and this is why I suggest go take a tour of the plant. We spent $1 million on a different kind of granulated activated carbon that we think if we use this new carbon and we change the filters more frequently, we can keep the number below 10. So, you know, but obviously it's better if it stops upstream from us so that we don't have to deal with it. I will say, one of the things I've learned from Brian Steglitz is the guy who runs the water plant. You know, he said, I'm the giant Brita filter for you. You know, so if you want to use a filter, that's fine. And I know lots of families with young kids thinking about putting in reverse osmosis units and things just to be extra careful. The only caution I would say is if you don't maintain the filters, it will be worse for you because they filter, and at some point there's breakthrough. You know, it can't hold any more of the material. So you have to change your filters based on what you're trying to get out of it. Somebody asked about lead. I'm pretty sure Ann Arbor has gotten all the lead fixtures out of our part of the system. I think where the challenge is houses built in the 20s that may have lead solder and things like that in their own fixtures. And I know the city does sampling directly from taps to look for that under lead. And there's a new lead and copper rule that I am not the expert on, but it's taking that kind of look at lead to an even finer, more granular level. We're, again, I think, fortunate that we've had a municipal supply for a long time. People have been paying attention, people have been investing and maintaining the infrastructure.
So that's the because when we buy bottled water from a store, does that bottled water necessarily mean that there aren't any PFAS in it?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, your water plant does way more testing than any bottled water plant would ever do. And that's truly true. There's no reason for you to buy bottled water unless they're guaranteeing it's PFAS free, you know. But no, you have, the water you get out of your tap is probably much cleaner and it's certainly more tested. If you go to our plant, we have a lab up there that runs full time. And this tap is running constantly, and it's the raw water at Barton. And the next one is the well water. And the next one is the first part of the treated water. And they can just sample that all the time, making sure, and they have the kits up there to check for bacteria and things like that. So go take a tour. But I'm pretty reassured that, you know, you're getting the best quality water, you know, being made up there. Again, we can't vouch for like your faucets and all the, you know, if you've still got galvanized in, you know, you could get some of the black. And any of you bump into our rusty water when they flush the hydrants, you all know that the city does this, and then it shows up in your house. Well, again, they try and get the word out. But, all right, I'm going to be mindful of time. I've just got a few more minutes, and I want to make sure.
Just ask, is that, I have an office in Ann Arbor on Main Street. I'm afraid to drink the water because the pipes are ancient and there's rust in them. Is that harmful? Can I drink that type of water?
I would say yes. I mean, you know, and if you're really concerned, you might want to call the water
I
plant.
did, and they were so casual about it. They said, oh, it's just rust. It's fine."
Well, I think compared to PFAS, rust is fine. And I'm sorry if they're casual, but I do remind people, you have pretty good paid professional staff,
Yes.
despite what some members of city council do in public meetings. And you should use them and call them if you have any trouble, because they will, for the most part, they will respond. I mean, they're all busy, and tell people, when I started the city, there were 1,100 employees, 1,000 employees, and we went under 650. Now we're back into like 720, so we've had about a 25 to 30% reduction. And I would argue you haven't seen a lot of significant reductions in quality service other than recycling and solid waste. And I don't work at the city anymore, so I can say these things. And I'm a resident too, so I pay taxes. And, you know, I want good services for the taxes we pay. All right, I want to make sure I touch on a few more. What was yours?
If you don't mind, emergent contaminants and medicines in the water.
Yeah, so the city was way ahead, and I think this is one of the problems that this EPA is not paying attention at the national level. Well, yeah, and I'm on an EPA advisory board that reviews the Office of Research and Development's program on sustainable and healthy communities. And the political appointee for the Office of Research and Development was in the room at my last advisory board meeting. And yeah, he spent 30 years doing chemistry for Koch Industries. And they're the ones that are going to be reviewing how the federal agency reviews PFAS.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I'm just not convinced that we're going to get the best results. Staff are great, but you know, it's again demoralizing. Lots of people retiring from EPA. Same thing at DEQ, and I think that's one of the things I worry about is succession planning. You know, are there 25-year-olds willing to go work for a state agency where if you're working in the water division, you may be, you know, several of those staff were charged with involuntary manslaughter. You know, and personally, I think that was more political than real. So. You know, and that's why I'm really enthused for the new slate of women running the government in the governor's office. Enbridge, Mike Schreiber at NWF is somebody that, I mean, we could probably spend a whole session on Enbridge. But
What do you think?
so Enbridge, there is a oil pipeline that basically takes oil from Canada through the UP, down to the Lower Peninsula,
To Sarnia.
all the way back to Canada. So it really doesn't, Michigan doesn't use it, and we need to be getting out of fossil fuels, period. So, I mean, any support for keeping this going is like, wow, we need to stop. So it's a huge risk that, again, nobody paid attention to. So this pipeline runs under the straits, and if it ever broke, and it's a lot of the, currently it's the tar sands oil. So tar sands oil is kind of thick and heavy. So if it breaks, it's not going to just float to the surface like Exxon Valdez, where you could, it's terrible, but at least you can skim it up, you know, it's separated. Tar sands oil is going to stay in a lump in the bottom and then just kind of discharge over time. And the currents there, and I'm a sailor, I did Mackinac races, and I've been through that area, and trying to do a cleanup in that area on a beautiful sunny summer day is going to be hard, let alone what are, yes, in a winter weather, stormy weather. So what I hear is the Attorney General, previous administration created a new authority to basically build a tunnel around this pipe to protect it. He created this separate, distinct authority and appointed certain people. And the new Attorney General is saying basically that was probably illegal. And so we'll see where that goes.
They were talking about building under, in the ground, a new pipeline.
Yeah.
The problem is, part of it is this pipeline, Enbridge was inspecting it, and of course, inspecting your own product, forget it. They were supposed to have tie downs every 75 feet, and there are areas that they've taken pictures of, and it's 3 times 75 feet, and it's just above the
There's no soil supporting the pipe anymore.
It's awful.
So,
Should all
okay,
be-
last couple of things, I just want to make sure you know, as you have concerns, if you live in the city of Ann Arbor, the Environmental Commission is a great place to go air your concerns. Any public meeting at the city is open to the public, other than those closed sessions.
Yeah, other than when they say, we're breaking.
But, and the Environmental Commission pretty much never goes into closed session. They're not dealing, their only job is to make recommendations, but 2 city council members sit on that, and then there's other members of the community. But that's a great place to go get your 3 minutes, and they don't get that many visitors, so if you need 5, I think just tell them, and then you can also go to council. But I think this is where, unless we as city employees hear from you as residents, we don't know what the concerns are and how there's often an answer, and sometimes it's not the answer you want to hear, but at least your staff, the people you're paying in your taxes, and they'll often come out to meetings like this. I wouldn't do this when I worked at the city, but if all of a sudden you're interested in stormwater and climate change and things like that, Jen Lawson, who's on our staff, or climate change, you're going to hear from Chris Olson next, I think. She's with the Watershed Council, and she helps run one of the climate leadership programs. But there's lots of good resources, so I think just if you can figure out what your concerns are, and I've always said if we get at least 5 or 10 people together, I'm happy to come out and do this. So, who did I miss?
I have a question. Plants that produce chemicals and dump them for you, technically, is it possible to capture that at the source before letting it out?
Oh, manufacturing plants?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's where, I think this plating plant, they put in carbon filters to kind of pre-treat. That's typically required. The question is DEQ or EO now doing enough to enforce?
Well, you have the Wolverine leather company or whatever on the western side.
Well, yeah, that's where, some people argue we didn't know about this material, and I think it's middle ground. I think, sure, in the beginning, we probably didn't know, but this is where Europe uses a precautionary principle. You kind of have to prove it's safe before you use it. But we've known that PFAS was going to be a problem for a while now, and Minnesota's been dealing with 3M for 12 years. So, it was just a matter of time. If you don't know, Wolverine Shoe Company made hush puppies. And so your hush puppies. Yeah, the hush puppies that shed the water, the reason it sheds the water is because of these substances. So
That's so bad. Hush puppies were such a nice shoe, and now you find this out.
well, and they just dumped old tanning stuff in fields. And then the other problem you have is it's in firefighting foam. So any Air Force base any airport where you, of course, had 19-year-olds training to put out fires, and they're just blowing this stuff everywhere, and people told them it was safe, and
Wasn't it even in some of our fire departments?
Ann Arbor had foam, and the replacement is just a shorter chain version that it's not clear it's really safer. So, you know,
I was hoping.
yeah, I mean, this is where we just have to find some alternatives. And it's hard because there are certain fires that you need this kind of foam to put it out in a safe way for the firefighters. But, yeah, no, you know, we're going to find this in a lot more places. So stay tuned. And then there's just the long-term questions like, okay, I have a fridge filter. Is it taking out PFAS? I'm throwing it in the garbage. Is that the right place for me to throw that? And yeah, how are we going to actually destroy this? It was a topic that came up at this meeting I was at with EPA, that right now we don't know of a good way to destroy this chemical. So even if you're collecting it in filters, where's it going to go? And I think one of the challenges that we haven't even started on is, so Ann Arbor has a pretty clean wastewater stream. We don't have a lot of plants or chemicals. And we have, it's a biological system. So there's critters in big tanks that we bubble with oxygen, and they do certain things, and then we get rid of the oxygen, they do other things. But there's these critters, and it's called residual solids. It's the best euphemism ever for the leftover material that hasn't been eaten by the critters at the end of the plant. Well, it's really, relatively speaking, it's clean. And so it's got phosphorus and things like that. And so we land apply it for non-human food crops on designated farms. Not willy-nilly, it's all regulated. Like, we know this farm is taking Ann Arbor solids, and well, we do that about half the year, and when the ground's frozen, we can't do that. We landfill it. But the question is, okay, if there's a little bit of PFAS in the water, and it's getting all the way through, is it in the sludge that we're now putting on farmland? And is Ann Arbor a liable party for that? You know, and is that getting into the food that these cows are eating? And then because this is the thing, it kind of bioaccumulates all through the food chain. So stay tuned. This is evolving, and so I hope this was helpful.